Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. Alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN, I'm Darren Kinnard, and we are in the midst of postseason action. We've got cross country into sectionals this week. Volleyball regionals have opened this week. And then, of course, the football playoffs kick off tomorrow night as we record on Thursday.
Yeah, I really love this portion of the postseason. Obviously, soccer and tennis and all of them get done a little bit earlier. Golf, of course, is usually the first one in the door. So, but this time of season, volleyball and football especially, they're kind of the headliners of the fall season, and it's just really fun and cool to see who can get the furthest, basically. So, volleyball is very interesting to me every single year, and football, of course, is the main attraction. And so, we're in probably my favorite part of the fall season.
And with soccer, Murfreesboro was the last team standing in 1A. They lost in the sectional semifinals at home to Columbia, who went on to win the sectional. Carbondale was the last 2A squad after a thrilling win in PKs over Marion. The Terriers lost last night in the Triad sectional to former South 7 foe Althoff. And so the local teams are out as far as soccer goes. We mentioned cross country. 1A will be running at Benton. The city park is always just a great backdrop for that. The girls run at 9. The boys run at 10. And, people have always told me before, if you've never been to the state cross country meet in Peoria, it is a spectacle.
Oh, yeah.
And it truly is. And, when you dial it back to the local scene, Benton puts on one of the best cross country sectionals because it's such a scenic background in the park. Now, don't talk to me about parking and getting out of the park afterwards. But I look forward to covering that Saturday. It should be a very competitive meet. And, And again, your trips to state are on the line.
Yeah, without a doubt. So everybody's going to be kind of upping it a little bit, and this is the time where a lot of coaches in cross country are like, this is about the time we want to be hitting our peak. State, of course, would be fantastic for them, but if you want to get to state, you usually have to be hitting your peak, and then you just put your best performance forward at state. But it's always fun, and then beautiful backdrop like you mentioned, and so you're going to see some pretty darn good racers this coming week.
Last year, the Benton regional was in a deluge. Is the only way I can describe it, and I think at least at this point the forecast is much better. In 1A, Anna Jonesboro's girls have had a great season. They've kind of fought through some injuries, but they are so deep that it hasn't derailed them at all. So they're one of the favorites. And of course, on the boys' side, Benton squad is somebody that you would expect to not only advance but probably come away with a plaque.
Yeah, well, they're always so good at it, and last year they had Geneseo, who was pretty darn good, and so it's been a culture that's been built at Benton specifically. But Anna Jonesboro also has been a team that we've been keeping our eye on without a doubt. Murfreesboro has the Gilmore girl, who's been fantastic her entire high school career, and so I've had my eyes on her for several years. But I think a lot of people are interested to see just how she finishes out her career, and so it's a big weekend, obviously.
2A will run at Olney. That will be 10 o'clock girls, 11 o'clock boys. Marion, the defending state champions. Yeah. No Dylan Nally, obviously, this year. He's taken his talents to Bloomington, Indiana to run for the Hoosiers. But Marion served notice at the regionals that, hey, we're going to be defending champs till somebody knocks us off, led by the Greer twins, who went 1-2, separated by about a second, which you'd expect from identical twins.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, and we talked about this with Benton and golf, and just, you have a building block, and for them that was Nally. Obviously, there was several blocks in front of Nally that put him in the position to be able to do what he did, but now he's another building block for that program that, there's going to be some dominance for Marion moving forward because they had this really good runner, and now he's been a part of that program and said, if you want to get anywhere near where I was, you got to do X, Y, Z, and they're doing those things, and that's why they remain to be very good.
And those younger kids were, a lot of them were freshmen running last year at state, so that experience bodes well. So Benton and Olney will be the cross-country sectionals for the area teams. Volleyball regionals, again, we record on Thursday. Regional finals are tonight. Sectionals next week, Tuesday and Thursday. Super Sectionals the following Monday, and you're going to have to humor me for a second, Matt, because that is such a big thing for me. It's something that a gentleman named Zach Kirker, who used to work at 1450.com in Springfield, he and I served on the media advisory committee, back pre-COVID, and this was a drum that he started banging, and then, we banged the drum together when we served. And it, because they always used to play the volleyball super on Saturday. Yeah. Which, again, we're talking playoffs. You got cross country, and then you tried to put in a volleyball super, and it made no sense at all because every other 4-class sport that has a super sectional played it on Monday or Tuesday, but for some reason volleyball felt like it had to be on Saturday, and they kind of heard us, and they said, well, okay, we'll play it on Friday. Yeah. And that made even less sense. I mean, it was better, but it honestly, it made less sense because that put sectionals Monday and Wednesday and then super on Friday, which meant you had one day to prepare for your biggest match of the season, and then you had a week off in a sport where they have no problem at all playing 5 matches on a Saturday. Right, yeah, and it almost kind of felt like they were, in my opinion at least, trying to build it almost like a tournament type of situation, which in the grand scheme of things, it is a tournament, but not in that way, You're supposed to have stages in this, and the Super Sectional wasn't really given its own stage. It was just part of Sectional Week, and so if you're going to do that, then the Sectional should instead have 8 teams in them, and the sectional final should be where the super sectional was, but they weren't doing that. And yeah, that week off also is just it's bizarre, and it's tough for the kids because they're not used to having a full week off usually. They have like I said, 5 games in a day sometimes, and then all of a sudden it's told take a week off, which can benefit a team, but a lot of times it just threw them completely out of whack. The hot teams lost that heat. The cold teams found a way to get hot, which fantastic, but the cold teams mostly weren't going to state. So right. Well, and the other thing from a media perspective is we tried to, just encourage them. Look, if you played Monday or Tuesday, you are it. Yeah. You are the only thing going on, and you're going to get coverage. But when you're on a Saturday with playoffs and in cross country and all the other things, something's got to give because there's only one of us, or there's only a small staff, and so you gotta why wouldn't you play on Monday? And I hadn't paid attention to it until yesterday. I was looking through it, and I saw Monday the 11th for the super, and I was like, oh, this is like manna from heaven. Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned the small media that are covering these things. 20 years ago, you could probably split up your departments a little bit. But the IHSA, luckily, has finally gone with the times and kind of recognized that, there's a lot of people that probably still are, that were doing it 20 years ago, but they're all split up. They're not as part of a team. They're all doing their one thing or another, like we're doing River Radio Sports Central and Channel 1450. They've got a nice team over there, but they're even a little bit smaller than what you would expect. And so, this presents an opportunity for the ones that do make it onto the Super and hopefully state get that coverage that they deserve, because if they don't get it, then it's just so-and-so made the state kind of basically at the end of the sportscast. Well, and I think that it fed into the volleyball, is second fiddle, and, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and now that's not the case. And the other thing that, when you look at all the other IHSA things, they are big about consistency. Yes. We do this in this sport, and, we run it similarly. And for whatever reason, volleyball was kind of a renegade in the mix, and so now it's not. And so, I'm elated. So anyway, on to the matches tonight, regional finals in 1A, and I think this might be the most interesting of the night. At Edwards County, it's Edwards County versus Wayne City. Wayne City has had one of the best years in school history. Edwards County, they deal with Fairfield and Carmi right there in the mix in the Black Diamond. That might be one of the matches of the night, I think. Yeah, I've been obviously in the mornings checking out the scores and everything, and that's been a regional that I've had my eye on. It was a nice regional to begin with, and now you see those two make it on to the regional final, and you're just kind of rubbing your hands together saying, oh boy, boys, strap in, this is going to be a good one. Also in 1A at ZR, Trico, the top seed, will face Cobden. The Lady Pioneers didn't play great in the semifinal win over the hosts, but they're clearly the top team in that regional. At NCOE, likely the top team in the region, the host Fighting Cardinals. They get Carrier Mills, and you got to feel a little bit bad for Carrier Mills. They've had great seasons the past 2 years, and each year they wind up seeing NCOE in the regional final.
Yeah, get them somewhere else, please, folks, because that they do deserve that opportunity to go to a sectional. But sometimes you just end up in a and I mean, this happens in all the sports that see regional, sectional, super sectional play, that there's always some team that does very well, but they just can't get over that hump. But who knows? I mean, that's why they play the games. This could be Carrier Mills' night. We'll find out here tonight. But NCOE definitely walks in as the favorite without a doubt.
At Woodlawn, it's Weber, the 2 seed, the top seed in that regional, against Sesslerville, Waltonville. The Lady Red Devils upset Steelville in the semis, so that's the other final in 1A. In 2A, at Newton, Fairfield is the top seed, but they get the host Lady Eagles. That's not a great situation to have to face a lower seeded team on their home floor.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we just talked about Ziegler Royalton, and it's always tough because someone's going to host it, and it's not always going to be that top seed. You'll see a lot of times where the bottom seed is hosting it, and they just kind of go on a run. They don't necessarily win their regional by any means, but they always are tough, and they usually win maybe a game that, when you look at it on paper, like, oh my gosh, they shouldn't have won that. And so the lower seeded teams that have the home advantage, they always seem to pull off something. So don't be surprised one way or another how this one turns out.
And Newton's a very good club. So at Carterville, Pinckneyville is the top seed. They face the host Lady Lions. Again, that same type of situation. Yeah. At Carmi, the Lady Bulldogs are the top seed. They get 4th-seeded Mount Carmel. And at Harrisburg, the other one that kind of caught my eye as a potential game of the night, you got the 2-seed Massac County against the 3-seed DuQuoin. And those teams have, they've been right around 7 and 8 in our coaches poll. They appear to be pretty even, and they're battling it out for a plaque.
Yeah, Massac County has been pretty darn good the past couple of years, without a doubt, and so DuQuoin hasn't been on my radar nearly as much, but they have started to build that up. So this one should be a pretty darn good game.
And when you look at in some of the other 2As, because they split up our area teams, and Nashville ends up over in the bracket of death, and they have to get top-seeded Columbia on Columbia's home floor. But Nashville's not scared of anybody, and they've split with Columbia this year.
Yeah, so it should end up being one of those type of games where it might go to third set and it might go to extra point. Who knows? It's going to be a very good one, I expect. I expect to, be looking at saying 3 sets at the end of the night and very close at the end of the night.
Yeah, if it's not 3, it's going to be like 25, 23, 26, 24.
Exactly. If I wake up tomorrow morning and I look at all the scores and I see 25-15, 25-12, I'm going to call you up and say there's a mistake.
Yeah, you didn't type that in right, Kinnard. Litchfield is top-seeded Staunton and Shelbyville. At Bree Central, the other one, and I don't care what sport it is, inevitably it feels like Mater Dei and Bree Central end up playing multiple times in every sport, and then you factor in this is for a regional title. Mater Dei is the favorite in the whole in probably all of 2A, because this is just a dominant club. But again, Bree Central on its home floor. This is, you better get there early if you're going to see this one.
Well, I told a story, I think, earlier this week in a meeting that we were both in about, playoff football. And Murfreesboro was up at Breeze a few years ago, and it was, if Breeze wins and Breeze Mater Dei wins that day, nobody was going to be in town the next week, and it's going to be everybody's in town, but you know where they're going to be at here tonight.
Yeah, don't expect to get a parking place anywhere close.
If you're not a Breeze Central, or if you're not a Breeze native, I should say, you should probably just expect to turn on one of the streaming services and just watch it that way.
And the other one that feeds into that sectional is at Carlinville, and that's Carlinville at Pana. In 3A, we've just got 2 area teams left. Carbondale will face Waterloo, who's the top seed, at Heron. And at Mascoutah, Centralia picked up what would be an upset by seed in the semis to advance to the championship match, but they get top seeded Mascoutah. And so you got 2 South 7 clubs that are both underdogs
Yeah.
by seed, but they're playing for a plaque tonight as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And honestly, for the Heron Regional, I wouldn't be surprised if Carbondale pulled off an upset purely on. So you talk about all the on-court stuff. Off the court, Waterloo's making a bit of a trip, whereas Carbondale, they get on a bus, but they're only traveling 10 minutes down the road. It's basically a home match for them compared to what Waterloo has to do. Don't be surprised, because bus rides do factor into things. I have seen where they are evenly matched, and then the team that gets off the bus is the one that ends up playing poorly. Don't be surprised if Waterloo, I'm not saying Waterloo will, because they're a very good team, but don't be surprised if they have an off night because they had to ride a bus for an hour and a half.
All right, let's shift gears to the football playoffs. We had the playoff pairing show on Saturday, and so we knew the what, and in some cases we knew when before we went off the air. But we'll start in 1A. Cesar-Valera-Waltonville gets a 7 seed. The Red Devils get a home game against the 10 seed Red Hill. That's 7-2 SVW, 6-3 Red Hill. This will be a future Black Diamond game. The stakes a little bit higher this time because this is a playoff game, and the Red Devils are coming off a loss at Flora where they were up 16-6 and ended up losing 22-6, and so back-to-back losses, not the way you want to head into the postseason. But the flip side is they do get this game at home. Yeah,
without a doubt. And that loss also pushed them down in the Little Egypt football poll as well, from number 9 to number 10 in the end-of-season poll. So, they definitely lost a little bit of a flair in the people's eye a little bit, the Red Devils have. But they do have a winnable game, I imagine. Red Hill's very good, but it's at home for the Red Devils. And they really love postseason action in Cesar, without a doubt. So it's going to be a gauntlet to go into for Red Hill. The Red Devils should be prepared for this one. The Salukis have a big challenge in front of them. I definitely put Cesar-Valera as not only the favorite on paper, but the presumptive favorite as well.
And the Salukis, their playoff points were so low. We thought they were going to have to win out to get in. Turned out all the 5 and 4s did get in. But their playoff number was so low. But on week 8, they went to Massac and shut them out 34-0, and then they rallied to beat Carlisle. So this is a team that's playing really well here coming in. So it's a very intriguing matchup to me here in round 1.
What's so intriguing to me too is that they had so few playoff points, but they still ended up as a 10 seed.
Right.
It folds out that way sometimes, but man, they should have been one of the last teams in, and they end up with a 10 seed. That's pretty darn good for them.
Right, and that's where the situation where if you're unfamiliar with the way the IHSA does things is there's nothing subjective about it. It's not a committee that sits there and hashes out who should be what. I mean, it is purely all the 9-0s, all the 8-1s, and it speaks to how many 5 and 4s ended up in the bracket. And one of those 5 and 4s is Dupo, who gets the 16 seed, and they get the unpleasant trip to Althoff round 1. That's a 7:00 Friday game, and it would be difficult to see any other result than a running clock in my mind.
The Crusaders are just so good, and so I would expect the same, but again, that's why they play the games.
No doubt. On to 2A, and we have a slew of area teams. Last Saturday, I covered Chester's home finale against Waterloo. Great game. The Yellow Jackets going for an unbeaten regular season, playing a team in Waterloo that was 7-1, a 4A playoff team, and it was a battle throughout. Waterloo ended up winning 35-28, and so that loss ended up costing Chester a top seed, and so they would have been the only unbeaten team in the bracket.
Yeah.
And as a result, as an 8-1 team, they end up as a 7 seed, and we'll get to their matchup in a minute. But that makes the Johnson City Indians the number 1 seed, and they get 5 and 4 Redbud out of the Cahokia at 1:00 Saturday at Ralph Davison Field, and so the Indians get that prime position. And look, they look primed to do some things in the postseason.
Without a doubt, that one loss, of course, being to Dixon. And as
a
everyone
4A playoff
4A,
school,
and one of the top teams in 4A, mind you. And everyone that I've talked to about that game, be it you or somebody else, has said, that final score is not anywhere near how close it really was. And so they're primed without a doubt, and they ran right through again, they take that loss to Dixon, but aside from that, the end of the Black Diamond schedule for them, they ran right through their opponents. They are primed for a deep playoff run, I really think so.
The 8-9 game is Warrensburg-Latham and Carmi-White County. The Bulldogs have to go on the road. That's not you talk about bus rides.
Yep.
That's not a close bus ride, but that's what you'd expect in an 8-9 game. 2 7-2 clubs. Warrensburg-Latham playing largely a 1A type schedule.
Right.
This is a winnable ball game for Carmi. This isn't
Sure.
like they're sitting there going, oh, we've got a monster here in round one, even though they do have to go on the road.
Right. Well, and for the Bulldogs, they just got to be careful because there's a lot of things going on right now. Kurt Simon's last season for the Bulldogs, and then also the fact that if you look at that bracket, Johnson City is right around the corner as long as they both come out with wins. And I could see the Bulldogs sitting there saying, we just got to get this win and get some revenge for ourselves in the second round. But that's very easily then also something that, okay, now you're looking ahead. You can't do that. You have to worry about your opponent in front of you, Warrensburg-Latham. You cannot even be thinking about the potential of revenge in the second round against Johnson City. So
You got to get there.
Bulldogs, again, yeah, that, and as I mentioned, also just emotions with Kurt Simon being his final year. So a lot of things that could be considered distractions. They got to lock in. It's very possible they could win here. 8-9 games always are fun and entertaining, but they got to lock in and they got to come in and be ready to play.
And knowing Kurt Simon, he has made no mention of this whatsoever.
That's correct.
He would rather that is not ever even a storyline, but that's our job in the media to do those things.
And he's done a great job because I did not know until about week 8. I had to text you and say, wait a minute.
Right.
And you were like, yeah, it's the last season. So,
and again, this is the South bracket. It's 16 teams. The other part of that top section is the 4th seed Pana at home against the 13 seed Shelbyville. Vandalia, 5 seed at home against Sangamon Valley. Now you get to the bottom half, and you get a couple more of our area teams. Chester, the 7 seed, does get a home game. They host the 10 seed Westville. That's a 3:00 game in Chester. And I mean, look, they lost to Waterloo. But I was very impressed with Chester. I mean, they do really good stuff offensively. They can throw it, they can run it. Defensively, they're pretty good. They ran into a young man in the backfield for Waterloo who was just a beast. And talking to Coach Belton after the game is, he didn't feel like that they would necessarily see anything that much better than what they just competed with, and they competed with Waterloo.
Yeah, well, and people forget, I think, that this is a team that beat DuQuoin at the beginning of the season. That's the one that gets talked about a bunch, but they also beat Freeburg in the non-conference, and you can't really control what your conference schedule looks like. You do the best you can. You try to run right through them, which they did. They did a very good job of that, but I know a lot of people walking into week 9 were still like, are they really that good? And I think that they proved to a lot of people that, yes, they absolutely are. They just, again, ran into a very good Waterloo team. And so with the loss, I saw some people saying that they had Chester. This is how much of a gauntlet 2A is. They thought with the loss, Chester might be going on the road. Right. And so if not on the road, at least going to be the 8 seed. So Chester ends up with the 7 seed, which is about where I think a lot of people had them with that loss. But, it's such a tough 2A bracket that some people thought they were going on the road.
And, when you look at, again, we look forward because we can.
Yes.
If Chester were to advance, they're likely going to see the 2 seed Maroa Forsyth, who is always good.
Always.
Beast program.
Always. And it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, it was fun, guys. But we look even further down. I was talking with someone else, and they were saying potentially, Johnson City set up so well at the top of the bracket, they could potentially see Maroa Forsyth in the semifinal, and as long as it goes chalk, it would be Johnson City hosting that as well. So we're looking very far down the way right now, but that's also something else we can look forward potentially to.
Maroa Forsyth hosting the 15 seed Decatur St. Teresa. The bottom half of the bracket has another team that I think you've got to keep your eye on here, in Flora. With that upset over SVW, Flora probably would have been, I don't have the playoff points in front of me, they would have probably been a 15 or a 16. Yeah. Instead, they have to go to Quincy Notre Dame. And that, that is a tough draw. Quincy Notre Dame, 8-1, a school of, 320 kids or whatever, but they won. What is it, Sangamon West, I think is what it is, and that's all the Springfield schools, including Sacred Heart Griffin. Right. So this is a team that's used to playing 5A, 6A, and beating 5A, 6A.
Right, exactly. And for Flora, it's kind of a pick your poison. Okay, you beat Sessa-Valier, now you get Quincy Notre Dame. If you take that loss, okay, do you get Johnson City or do you get Murrah Ford? It's a no-win situation for them. All they can really do is say, we got to go. We got to put our best foot forward. Maybe Quincy Notre Dame has an off day. Maybe we have the best day of our season. Maybe the stars align and we're able to beat them. But yeah, Quincy Notre Dame is such a tough opponent to draw.
Zero pressure though on the Wolves.
Yeah.
They can just go and let her rip.
Absolutely.
And you 6-3, you clinch, you're automatically in, and so now you can just let her rip. And the winner of that game would play the winner of Arthur Lovington Atwood Hammond or North Mac, the 6-11 game. ALAH is another one of the 8-1 teams, and just going through there, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That looks like 7 8-1 teams, and I know that's riveting to hear me count. So 7 8-1 no 9-0s, but 7 8-1s in that bottom bracket.
And I know they're not in our area, but how surprising was it that Murrah Forsyth's opponent, St. Teresa, who's usually a powerhouse, ends up as a 15 seed.
Right, and St. Teresa's, of course, they beat Johnson City a couple years ago in the semis on the way to a state title, and then last year was just not St. Teresa-like, and so now they get back in, and so they're 5-4, and so on to 3A. Again, more local teams, and we mentioned still got Johnson City on the brain. 5-4 West Frankfort, the 16 seed, and we talked to Coach Beery on our playoff show, and we talked to him early, and they knew they were in because the IHSA put that announcement out earlier in the afternoon of the 256 teams. We didn't know the pairings yet, but we knew that all the 5-4s got in. West Frankfort was one of those that was on the borderline. Yep. They get in, and you knew the way the list goes that they were probably going to be a 16 seed, and that means a trip to unbeaten St. Joe Ogden.
Yeah, and that's going to be tough, but, they've seen Carterville, who played them as well, and, we don't really transitive property with things here, but
it's fun.
It's fun. It's very fun, and at the same time, West Frankfort did play Carterville pretty well, right. And Carterville played St. Joe Ogden pretty well. So, again, it's one of those things where if the conditions are right, you got a bunch of young kids on West Frankfort. They have their next 3 years basically mapped out. So if you can kind of tap into that young energy, there's something about freshmen and sophomores at the varsity level that, yes, they're very much like baby deer out there, but just there's always a moment where it clicks for them, and then it's just like they see everything, and it turns out very well usually in those moments. It could be this moment for them. Maybe it happens in the offseason, but sometimes it happens in the middle of the season, and that's when those teams that are led by sophomores go on a run that maybe they shouldn't have gone on. This is possible, but it's not going to be an easy task by any means for West Frankfort. And,
the transitive property we're talking about is Frankfort had the ball with a chance to win at Carterville. Carterville got within a score and had a chance late at St. Joe Ogden. Now, that was one of the, rainy weekends, but still – so, I mean, it's not like that you're sitting there with a Rochester in its glory days. And the Redbirds have had a chance to get healthy. Weeks 8 and 9 were against teams that they were able to handle. And so, hopefully Travion Johnson's been able to get back healthy. And look, and the most important thing for Frankfort is you got to survive that initial wave. And you can't get down 14, 21 points early. It's going to be a long afternoon.
Right.
And then if you can hang in there, and then maybe you can make it a game in the fourth quarter.
And I've been really impressed with their quarterback, Lucas Parker, this year, just by the fact that, Travion Johnson's been out the past couple of weeks, hasn't played as much, rather, and he's stepped right on up. He's thrown for 150 yards, I think, both weeks. He's used his legs. He's been there as a leader when their de facto leader hasn't been in the game as much. And so, again, these sophomores, they just need a moment to click, and then anything is possible.
The 8-9 game is Roxana at 7-2, hosting Tolono Unity at 6-3. That's again, 8-9 games are what they are. And then the one question that we maybe had going in, once we knew who was definitely in, was Nashville. And when we didn't see them in 2A, we knew they were bumped up to 3. The Hornets get the 4 seed. The 8-1 Hornets, They're at home against Stanford Olympia, the 13 seed, who's 6-3. That's a 2:30 game on Saturday. The SJO Frankfurt game's a 2:00 game Saturday. But Nashville, just because it's, they're maybe, don't sleep on them just because they're up a class.
Right. Well, and it was so ironic because all season we heard people saying, hey, Murfreesboro might go down to 3A, Centralia might go down to 4A, and then it's Nashville going up to 3A. Yeah, and that's just how the dice roll sometimes. But, yeah, Nashville is one of the best teams, if not the best in the area. Kohlbaum is a fantastic running back. Klingeman is a great quarterback. They're going to be fine in 3A. There's no monster they can't slay, if you will. They're going to be fine. It's just going to be a matter of how far can their stars take them, basically.
And, again, by and large, I really like their draw. I mean, Olympia will be a little different look for them. But again, in the bracket below them, you've got Greenville at the 5 at 8-1, hosting Fairfield, the 12 seed at 6-3. And it feels like one of those matchups we see here almost every year.
Well, and back to Nashville real quickly, you say it's a different look, but at the same time, they saw Olympia a few years ago.
Right.
So it was just in 2A. So it's not like Coach Kazuka isn't familiar with this. He knows what to do because I believe they won that game as well. So it'll be fine. But yeah, there's a lot of rematches, and when we dig a little bit further in here as we get there, there's a lot of rematches that are either in the first round or potentially in the second round.
And when we get to the bottom part of the bracket in 3A, you've got Mount Carmel, a 15 seed at 5-4. They have to go to Sullivan Oka Valley, who's one of the unbeatens at 9-0. But this is a game that Mount Carmel, clearly with their schedule, this is not, they're the 15th seed.
Right.
And this is obviously a very good team, but it's not a monster sitting there that they're going to be intimidated.
Right.
by.
Well, early in the season, we said that Mount Carmel found out what life without Blaine Sisson is like, but then they also found out how to live without him. And it took a little bit of time, but they did it. And then their only loss since then they lost to Olney, but then they also took another loss. But
Casey Westfield.
But against two very good clubs,
right.
And so a 5-4 team that is very deceptive without a doubt. And then all of the teams, a lot of the players that are on that team rather, were part of that state run last year. When you get into the playoffs, it's also having that mentality of we're done if we lose this one. And some teams don't have that experience. This team does. They get it. So even though they're 5-4, doesn't mean that they're going to walk in like your typical 5-4 team. They'll walk in like a 7-2 team probably.
You're sliding down the bracket. The Benton Rangers get the 10 seed at 6-3. They go on the road to face New Berlin. The Pretzels are 7-2 and the 7 seed. And you mentioned one of those rematches. If we have two upsets by seed, and it feels like we're contractually obligated to see Mount Carmel and Benton in the postseason, that could happen in round 2. But let's not get the cart before the horse. The Rangers have look like they found something down the stretch.
Yes.
They've won 3 in a row, and they've done it in an impressive fashion. They're going to face a New Berlin attack that is run. Mm-hmm. They play out of the single tee, and they've piled up a bunch of yards, but they've only thrown for like 130 all season, and so obviously they're really good at what they're doing.
Yep.
But this feels like that one of those we talked about Frankfurt hanging in there.
Yep.
If Benton can get a lead early, that's going to be enormous. That especially on the road.
Sure, and I mean honestly, what better opponent to be matched up with than one that runs and runs and runs when Ben maybe their biggest strength, you could probably point to Tiffin Kazukis as one of their potential biggest strengths, but I would say their biggest strength is their run defense.
Yeah.
They have shut down just about every predominant rusher that they have seen this season. Tyjair Kellum's one of them. I believe Chance Myers got shut down when they played Carterville. They shut down Travion Johnson. They are very good at stopping the run. So this is one of those inertia moments, So we'll find out here who's got the better of the two.
Bottom part of the bracket, again, we see familiar foes as DeCoin, the 11 seed at 6-3, goes on the road to face Monticello, the 6 seed, who's 7-2. That's a 2:00 kick Saturday in Monticello. And again, there's, you wouldn't think that teams that far away would be familiar with each other, but, this is, a rematch.
Yes, it is. From last year, it's not like, we're saying, a couple years ago they saw each other. No, this is from last year. So Logan Spain, year 2 as head coach of DuQuoin, and he's like, I got notes. I'm ready to go.
And the other game in the bottom part of the 3A bracket is the 3-seed Williamsville, who's 8-1, hosting Carlinville. That will be a 7:00 Friday. In 4A, the Harrisburg Bulldogs were one of those 5-4 teams sitting on the fence, sweating out the day. They knew they got in, but you knew when they were bottom 4 of the points that they were going to be a 16 seed, and their gift for getting into the postseason is a trip to top-seeded Breese Central, who just wrapped up the first unbeaten regular season in school history with a 50-6 win at Heron. The Bulldogs get in, but that's going to be a tough matchup.
It is, and it's one of those things where the team is good. It's been good. It's faced some of its own challenges this year, but it is good, and it's unfortunate that you have to run into a buzzsaw like that. You can beat buzzsaws, but they are very tough to get through. The Cougars just have been unstoppable all season long. We'll find out, though, but, going up to Breese, that is very tough challenge. The environment they have at Breese is fantastic. Their fans are going to come out. They're going to be shouting from an hour before kickoff. It's going to be wild for Harrisburg. Best of luck to the Bulldogs, but Breese is coming in as a big favorite.
And the 8-9 game is one that you're going to be calling, as the Murfreesboro Red Devils will make the trek to Macomb. And I stress on trek because there's no easy way to get to Macomb. This is a matchup of 7-2s. It's 8-9. It's a rematch of
2 years ago.
A couple years ago, and I think they've played 2 or 3 times in the postseason, haven't they?
This will be the 3rd time in the past 4 years. Yeah,
right. And so again, some familiarity there, and again, this is a Murfreesboro team that's not going to be bothered by going on the road.
No, not one bit. Their losses have come on the road, but the coaches that I've talked to have said we know where the issues were, and we have been correcting them. And so you look at what they've done wrong, and they all seem kind of easily correctable type of things. So, and the Bombers, they have a good team without a doubt. But when you look on paper, just Murfreesboro does look like the kind of scarier beast, and they've got a 2-0 record on the Bombers. So Macomb is coming in as the little brother kind of, and saying, we got to get a win. We can't let these guys hold it on us. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it out. But the information that you and I have gotten is that, they're 7-2, but they've played in a bit of a weaker conference this year. The Ohio division this year was a little bit down as well, though, with Heron and Massac County struggling. So, they marry each other pretty well, I think. But I do think Murfreesboro has a slight edge, even though they have that 4-hour bus ride. That might be, though, as we talked about earlier, that might be the deciding factor. Having a 4-hour bus ride, they have to get on at probably about 7 a.m. That might be the thing here that the Red Devils have to overcome more than anything.
And the one thing that I think that, why Murfreesboro has a lot of success, especially in the postseason against teams that they don't see a lot of, and, even though there's a lot of film out there, and film's an old term, I know, but there's a lot of game video out there. But Murfreesboro runs the misdirection stuff, and when you're maybe not used to seeing that, that can take a bit to, and if you're, as good as Tyjair Kellum is, if he's got a blink, he's gone. And that's, and Gary Carter always seems to have some wrinkles in the postseason.
Absolutely.
And I think that, he's one of those guys in the postseason that it's not that he doesn't play all his cards during the regular season, but he always finds a little something for the postseason.
Well, I would say almost that the misdirection that you and I know so well might be the wrinkle he adds into the postseason. Because, yes, we've seen it this year, but we've really only seen the double handoff that everybody kind of knows and loves for Murfreesboro. This year, other than that, there's not been a lot of misdirection. There's been a lot of motion, I'll say that much, but the misdirection hasn't. That might be the wrinkle that we see added in here. Bryson Canale, who was fantastic last year for them, started the season off with an injury, and he's been back since week 4, but he's only just now starting to get reintegrated into the offense. So you could maybe see a double wing come out that they haven't used since, I think, 2020, honestly.
Also in 4A, Carterville is a 5 seed, and the Lions get a home game against Mount Zion, who's a 12 seed at 6-3. That is one of the Friday games, a 7:00 Friday kick at Lions Field in Carterville. And Mount Zion's got a couple of dudes, a tight end and a receiver, that are getting some big-time looks.
Yep.
But at the same point, they're 6-3, so it's not as if this is some unbeatable. Other teams have figured out how to stop them.
Right.
So Carterville certainly, while a big challenge in front of them, and Mount Zion plays a healthy schedule.
Yes.
But the Lions may be playing as well as anybody right now heading into the postseason.
I would argue as much. And I mean, they've got a win over Murfreesboro just a few weeks ago. They beat Nashville in week 2. People sometimes forget about that. They have picked up some huge wins this season that have proven that, the Lions are for real, and they are one of the better teams in the area. Just because they're matched up with a team that has a couple of Power 5 potential guys doesn't mean that they can't handle them, especially when you're talking about being on your own home field. The Lions should feel pretty comfortable with this Friday night.
Down in the bottom half of the bracket, we don't have anybody in the immediate area, but we do have the unbeaten Richland County Tigers. A complete 180 from last year, 0-9 to 9-0, and they get the 2 seed.
Yeah, how about that?
And they will host Kewanee, who's the 15 seed. That's a 3:00 game, and you talk about bus rides. There ain't no straight roads from Kewanee to Olney.
Nope. It is one of those ones that is in central Illinois, but it's definitely kind of in the middle of nowhere, central Illinois, and so they'll be traveling through some corn and whatnot, and they'll find their way here without a doubt to Olney, but it's not going to be one of those just get on I-57 and drive type of situations.
7-10 games, a pair of 7-2 teams. Mantino hosting Normal U-High. Bottom part of the bracket, you got the 3 seed Waterloo, who we talked about beating Chester at 8-1 at home against Taylorville. That's a 1:00 kick. And I think one of the interesting 4A games, 6 seed Cahokia hosting the 11 seed Columbia.
Yeah.
That's 7-2 Cahokia, 6-3 Columbia. That's a 7:00 Friday. And I said this before the end of the season, I think Cahokia is a scary team in the 4A bottom bracket.
Yes, and they've got everything kind of lined up for them right now. Richland County is probably their biggest challenge in that quadrant, and so we'll find out just how good everybody is. But in terms of that lower bracket, that is one that I think is set up for Richland County and Cahokia potentially to be the ones duking it out. Not to dismiss anybody else in that quadrant, but that's very interesting. And then real quickly back to the other quadrant, you look at it, and at least from my perspective, from Murfreesboro, these teams have all seen each other for the most part. So it's going to be rematch after rematch after rematch for everybody. In terms of Murfreesboro, if they were to want to see a new opponent, they have to get to the semifinal to even have that opportunity.
Well, and the thing is that, again, we look ahead. If Murfreesboro wins, Bree Central wins, that's round 2, but that's at Murfreesboro. The way the IHSA does who hosts what. So that would bode well for the Red Devils, at least in that regard.
And I've talked to the coaching staff real quickly about, how things have mirrored 2019 for Murfreesboro this year. But then you look at the postseason, and I'm looking at them like that's almost more of a mirror of 2021 because they started at home against Macomb, and then they went to Bree Central in the second round. So it'd just be the opposite if they were to get a win and Bree Central get a win.
The one game I didn't talk about in 4A was the 4 seed. This would be who Carterville Mount Zion would play, would be the winner of Rochester, Peoria, Notre Dame. Rochester 7-2, Peoria, Notre Dame 5-4, and of course Rochester. We talked about it in last week's podcast with all the nonsense going on with the hazing issue, and the coach was suspended for week 9. It didn't seem to bother them as they went out and drilled Sacred Heart Griffin.
Yeah.
But again, you just until somebody beats Rochester, they're the monster in the bracket.
Well, and that's a very interesting matchup there because Peoria Notre Dame is a very good team right there that plays usually up against 6A teams for the most part. So
that 5-4 is misleading.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens there, but that one could be a very good game.
On to 5A, and our 2 area teams are both in the top part of the southern bracket. Centralia at 8 and the 8 seed at 6-3 gets a home game against Metamora, 6-3 team. Just a team with tremendous, tradition and history. Yep. That's a 3:00 kick in Centralia, and so the Orphans not only get in, they take care of their business down the stretch to get in, but then they get a home game to boot, and so it will be quite a challenge though with Metamora.
Oh, yeah.
You obviously from being up in that vicinity, they're year in, year out, they're tough.
Yeah, growing up, they were always a team that you heard about, but since I was going to Bloomington, I didn't pay attention because I was 17. I was, whatever, who cares? That's Metamora or whatever. But they're very good, and they just had to make the trip down here a few years ago to Marion, so they're probably a little angry. They got to make the trip again. But that Centralia team, as we talked about, young teams, just when they get into the postseason, deer in headlights sometimes, but sometimes magic happens, and so we'll see what happens here. I'm very intrigued by Centralia this year.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those, and what you'd expect with an 8-9 game, and I think it's one of the most interesting first-round games. The top seed in the bottom bracket is Morgan Park, and they play the 16 seed Tinley Park, which just shows you how crazy 5A is.
Yeah.
Those are Chicago schools.
Yeah, and they're in the South bracket.
That's the South bracket.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even when I was growing up and playing for Bloomington and 6A for the most part when I was growing up, and we didn't see teams like that in the South bracket. So that's just how crazy it is this year.
Now, Marion, the other South 7 squad in, the Wildcats get in at 6-3 as they take care of their business down the stretch to get there. They go on the road Friday night to take on the 5th-seeded Highland. And again, this just shows you Highland at 6-3 gets a 5 seed.
Yeah.
But that's just the way the bracket falls. There's only one 8-1 team in the entire South bracket. And so it's just a lot of teams. Highland is a team that enormous amount of playoff points. I think they were up around 50, so that tells you how strong a schedule that they played. But Marion is got some things going. It's going to have to be a shootout because the Wildcats have been fighting some injuries on defense and have really struggled to stop people down the stretch. But Callahan Roper's shown he can be up to that challenge. Yeah. Coming off a school record 7 touchdown passes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what a performance by Callahan Roper too. And Marion was team of the week, and so I was out there at practice yesterday and listened to some of the coaches talk a little bit while the kids were coming out, and they're confident. They think they've got some things figured out. Now, obviously, you're going to have to play the game, but they believe that, we know some things that they're doing, and we think we can neutralize that. If you neutralize a good team's bread and butter, now they're scrambling. And so I don't know if it's the bread and butter that they've figured out per se, but they think they've got some things figured out, so they should be taking some things away from a very good Highland team.
The other 4A game is Triad, a 4 seed at 7-2, getting the 13 seed Morris at 5-4, and ignore that record in seed. Morris is one of those teams that plays in just a crazy difficult conference, and their schedule's ridiculous. And, they came down a couple years ago, and it may have been last year. It all runs together at some point. And kind of whacks Centralia. So the road trip's not going to matter to them. Triad is a team that, they're not exactly flying into the postseason. Right. And so this could be one of those upsets by seed that wouldn't really be an upset.
Right, exactly. If you're just going by chalk, then yeah, absolutely. But we'll see. But that would be huge for them because then they get a guaranteed play home game the next week, I believe. So it would be
unless it's Marion.
Right? Yeah, it's true.
Yes, Marion. They could have to be on the road twice in a row if Marion can beat Highland. But again, I think that's a tough matchup for Triad. The bottom half of the bracket: 2 Peoria hosting 5 Hillcrest, 7 Corliss hosting the 10 seed Thornton Fractional North, the 3 seeds Muhammad Seymour hosting Sacred Heart Griffin, and then you've got Joliet Catholic as the 6 seed hosting Jacksonville. And so you see a bunch of teams that are outside of even our extended purview there. And really for the rest of the bigger schools in 6A, East St. Louis gets the number 1 seed. Again, no unbeatens, and so the Flyers at 8-1. The only loss coming to IMG Academy in overtime, 14-13. So it's been a phenomenal season. They open at home against Springfield. That's a 2:00 Saturday game, and look, Eastside's got to be a favorite in 6A. The whole thing
across the state. That is what people are saying. I've got friends all across the state, and they were paying attention to it Saturday, and almost everybody was like, "Yeah, that's Eastside's to lose," and they were even talking about the game against IMG, and I know we talked about it a little bit, but they were all saying, Yeah, that should have been East St. Louis's win, and they kind of choked it away a little bit. And it is what it is. Things happen. You have a blocked extra point and whatnot, and it happens that way. But when everyone's saying that you should have beaten the top 10 team in the nation,
Right.
Yeah, that's your bracket to win.
And, in 7A, Collinsville got in at 5-4. They are going to be on the road Friday at 6 against Batavia, who is the 4 seed. And again, 7A and 8A, they seed it 1 through 32. Yep. So there is no north and south. It's whoever's on the docket. So Collinsville will be going to Batavia.
There's always a great club.
Right.
Always.
And again, those names are almost always familiar at the top of the bigger one. In 8A, you've got Belleville East, who is a 21 seed on the road at Loyola Academy.
How about that?
Now they can probably get some help from East St. Louis at least for some breakdowns, but Loyola Academy a down year at 7-2. But again, I wouldn't bet against them in the postseason. No. I don't encourage betting anyway. This is a high school sports podcast. And the other team from the region, Edwardsville's a 19 seed, and will have to go on the road to face the 14th seed York. That's a 6-3 versus 7-2, 6 o'clock Friday. And so that's the way the 8 classes shake out for the teams in the region. Again, I've said it many times that playoff Saturday, not that I'm not going to enjoy playoffs on Friday night going to see Carterville, but that playoff Saturday is one of my favorite work days of the year.
It's the best. You've got not the best of the best, I guess, but you got the best of the best playing each other, and you're seeing, for the most part, a lot of people are seeing teams they have never seen before. Right. It is a head-to-head record of 0-0, so it's a fun time. You get to see new teams you've never thought you would see and whatnot, and it's so fun. It really is.
Especially with the smaller schools, and I use that term loosely. When you come into town and the town's, all the windows are painted in the businesses downtown, there's signs up all over the place. You get out to the schools, the people are out there hours before game time. The road teams bring in a whole passel, maybe bringing their whole town as well. And then it's that win or go home. And it's just, you put it all together. It's one of my favorite days.
The send-offs are so cool for these smaller schools. And then, so the people that are there to send them off somehow end up being there, beating you. If you're one of the players, they end up beating your bus, and they're there to welcome you. It's so cool. It's so fun, and it's great experiences. Some of these schools, this is their one and only trip in the past 10 years, and for the next 10 years potentially. So it's something that, if you're not used to it, cherish it. If you are used to it, well, gosh darn it, you should be experienced. You better go get a win.
Of course, we will have all your scores and highlights on riverradiosportscentral.com. We will have 2 editions of Friday Night Live. We'll have the traditional Friday night since we've got several games. So we'll do that on the River Radio Sports Central Facebook page. And then we'll have a special Saturday playoff edition of Friday Night Live. And we'll have plenty to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you've got the Murfreesboro game. What time and where?
3 o'clock is kickoff. We'll be on the air at 2:45. The intro plays at 2:43. For those that want to know that down to the minute, it'll be on 91.1 WDBX. You can find it on WDBX.org as well if you're going to be outside of the range of the tower. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have a lot of fun with it. Second time that we've been to Macomb in the past 3 years, so we know our way around there at this point.
You just know it's a long trip.
Yeah.
And both of the games Friday you can hear on our River Radio stations, Carterville at home, and then Marion on the road at Highland. Marion game's on 95.1 Steve FM. Carterville is on, I don't remember which JPF.
1340 AM
1340.
And 99.5 FM.
Okay. Yeah. And here's the thing is that you can go on the River Radio Sports Central page and look for broadcasts, and it will tell you the exact place. It will have links if you need to stream it, so you don't need to wait for some knucklehead to mess up and tell you which WJPF AM it is.
And there's apps also for JPF and for Steve if you want to listen. For all of our stations, there's apps. But if you want to listen to those games, they'll be streaming on those apps as well. DBX, to my knowledge, does not have an app, so you'll be...
but it is a stream
It will be on the stream, absolutely. And I remember, I want to say it was 2019 when they went to Effingham for the semifinal. I remember getting back and being told that there were so many people trying to listen into our broadcast that it was buffering too much and you couldn't.
Wow.
So that was the unfortunate part, but that was great to know that everybody was trying to listen. Yeah, exactly. So I think they've solved that problem since, but it was one of those things where they'd never expected it to happen, and then it happened, and they're like, we got to up some things for the website. So, but yeah, there's plenty of ways to listen to the 3 games that are coming from River Radio, and just whoever you're listening to, just enjoy it, and hopefully all the calls are good.
Volleyball regional finals Thursday night. You got cross-country sectionals on Saturday, and, of course, all the football playoffs on Friday and Saturday. It's a great time to be in high school sports media. Well, that's going to do it for this River Radio Sports Central podcast, presented by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy the games, enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.